and welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about green leaf candle holder. Now this is a frame that I bought at Goodwill, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. First of all, I had to make some wire frames to hold my glass. So I made my typical loops that I use to hold my round cabochon type glass circles. I'm using 22 gauge wire, and I am bending them around a baling tool. Now you don't have to use these pliers. You can use any round object you have that ends up giving you the correct size loops for your glass that you're going to use. And so I made a bunch of strings of these. I'm using, as I said, 22 gauge bare copper wire, and I'm winding them around with some needle nose pliers and making nice long pieces of wire frames. I'm using 7/32 inch black backed copper wire. I'm cutting them in different strips. This particular one I'm cutting right now in half to wrap around the glass globs. If I'm using glass globs that are about 15 millimeters or larger, then a half or a third the width of your foil is fine. But if I'm using like 10 millimeter or 8 millimeter circles, then I'm going to want to use thinner strips. Now I'm just showing you for an example winding around a glass glob. This glob is about 3/4 of an inch in diameter, so I'm using a 1/2 inch width of the 7/32 inch foil. After I wrap around the widest part of the glob, I am pressing down with a plastic fid. You can use anything you have to press them down so they're nice and smooth. Now this is an example of what I do to any metal that I have. So when you buy metal, either this, which is like a macrame hoop that you'd use for a dream catcher, for example, or a wire shape that you buy at a used place, you need to cover the metal with foil. Or you can test the metal. Sometimes the metal will actually take solder, but usually it's made out of some kind of alloy and it won't take solder. So this is one way you can wrap your object. You can use, I'm using the full width of the foil. Sometimes I use a wider piece of foil. Sometimes I cut the foil. It really depends on the size metal that you're trying to wrap. This way of going the long way around your hoop or your object works very nicely. Or you can do this way of going around with your foil. The idea is to cover it as smoothly as possible, and obviously you don't want to spend forever doing this, and they all have their plus and minuses. This going around makes for a nice adherence to the metal. Either way, if you heat up the foil too much while you're working on it, you're going to see the seam, and I don't like seeing the seam, so sometimes I have to add solder on top of it, kind of like to kind of hide the seam itself. But anyways, the longer the piece you use, the less of a chance for it to come apart once you start soldering. Because if you use this very small piece, then when you heat it up, it might like pop off. So anyways, whatever you do, you need to smooth down the foil so it's as smooth as possible. You can see the two different ways that I do things. So this is, and I'm using 22 gauge for my tree form, but this is the frame that I bought at a used Goodwill, And that blue thing at the bottom is some painter's tape that I wrapped around the electrical parts, because this was originally electrically wired, so you can put a light bulb in it. You will notice when I'm done, I actually took this out after all that working around this wires and stuff, because the light bulb kind of raised the light too high and I didn't like the look. So I ended up taking out the electric part. But anyways, what I did for all these different 4 sides of my lantern is I made different twisty wired tree parts. So I started off with a bunch of wires of 22 gauge wire. I like 22 gauge for something like this because it bends very nicely, but it's still visible when you're done. So you end up still being able to see the branches. And you don't want to have it so thick that you can't put your bead on it. So you got to make sure that whatever tree leaf glass bead things that you're going to be using can go through the wire. So you may find you have to use something thinner than the 22 gauge. Now these leaves that I bought, I had already foiled, and you can see that I only used like 1/4 of the width of the foil to wrap around them. And the reason I put foil all around these leaves was so that I can solder them in place when I'm done. So at the end of each one of these pieces of wire, I wired them on, sometimes to the top, sometimes to the side, and then I would add a leaf to it. And later on, I'm going to bend them where I want to put them. So this is where I figured that these branches are going to go to the top, they're going to go to the side. I'm going to have all different thicknesses of the branches, and they're going to have leaves. Now I think I had 4 different colored leaves. I usually, when I buy something, like when I bought these leaves, is I try to get the biggest variety as I can because I like variety. And all of these leaves are transparent in that light will go through them. So I didn't want to have opaque leaves, but you'll notice that some of them are some of them are translucent and some are transparent. That's just the way that what I could get. So this is what I got. And so I wanted to spread them out so they have different leaves, different colored leaves on the different sides. And then I decided that I needed the tree trunk to be a little bit beefier at the bottom, so I added more wires to the bottom of it, and then kind of twisted them up together, and then twisted them around the original tree trunk to add some more branches. Now you're going to find that depending on the size of your original frame, will tell you, how many wires you'll have to use. I think I ended up using about 12 wires on each section. Now the nice thing about using a pre-existing frame like I did on this, instead of making one out of just buying a bunch of wire hoops and soldering them all together, was this was really sturdy. So for this particular project, it made it a lot easier to make this tree. I didn't have to worry about the frame of the candle holder itself falling apart while I'm working on it, because it was really strong to begin with. And of course I did cover the whole frame with the foil before I started working, so that I didn't have to worry about it not sticking to the solder. So I'm making some more branches. I'm just like putting the wire through a leaf and then twisting till it ended up looking and holding together nicely. And I just went from one area to another. And I like each side of my project to be different. So each of the 4 sides of this candle, I tried to vary the shape of the trunk of the tree and the shape of each branch. I wanted them different. I wanted to vary the number of leaves. I wanted to vary, the direction of each branch. So I just went from one section to another, trying to make them all a little bit different. Sometimes I would have a wire, like I'm doing right now, go from one leaf and then go up to another leaf and then go back. So whatever works for you. And then when it went back, I needed to then twist it around the original branch itself. So that would take a little bit longer because I kind of had to use needle nose and kind of like thread them around. And remember, I'm going to add solder to all these branches, so they will look more similar in shape when I'm done because they will be soldered. Now, I bought these glass rectangles that have holes on each end, which are really cool. They come in all different colors, and I think I ended up buying them from Temu. But the thing with these glass, when you look to buy glass, you will find it available at one site, and then a month later it won't be available. So you pretty much have to keep looking for different shapes that are available. You never know. These particular pieces of glass came in a variety of colors. Some were a little more transparent than others. Basically, I bought a bunch of different groups of colors and then put all the greens and whites together, and those are what I'm using for this project. And then I'm kind of like sewing them around the loop at the top of the lantern. Kind of loop, 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 loop. Again, I'm using pretty thin wire. I usually use like 26 gauge or something around that size. I want something that's strong, but that I can easily bend around my project, and it's not going to be a pain to thread through the glass. So you're going to have to, depending on the glass you get, some glass has larger holes in it than others. So these are basically like beads, and I'm not foiling the sides of these because they come with those holes on the top and the bottom. It's very handy. I can just kind of sew them on and use them to add interest to my project, and I don't have to foil and solder between them. So it's a different look when you end up using beaded glass as actual beads, in that you're not foiling, you're just wiring them on. So that's very handy. And now I am soldering. I'm adding flux to the project itself and then soldering. Right now, first of all, I'm tacking the leaves where I want them. So I may have to adjust the wires. I may have to bend the leaves some to solder them where I want to, because right now they're kind of like bending all over the place, and I don't want that. But I want the leaves to be attached as well as possible. So if I can attach them to a different leaf or the side of the frame or one of the branches, all the better. Because the more areas I can attach them to, the stronger my art will be when I'm done. Now, when you're using, as I've said in my other videos, when you're soldering onto these pieces of glass that you have foiled with a very thin strip of foil, like I did with this, you don't want to heat up your glass very much. If you hold the solder on the foil too long, your glass will pop out. Now, yes, these particular leaves are foiled and beaded on. They're sewed on also. So they're not going to actually pop out and fall to the floor, but they will repel from the foil, and then you'll have a mess. You'll have a leaf with kind of loose foil, and you don't really want that. So you're going to want to just heat up just a little bit. This makes for your glass, for your project when you're done, you will not get that really smooth stained glass look that people often associate with stained glass, because you're not going to be able to go around and smooth out the foil and the solder as much as you might with a larger project. If you did that, you would heat up the foil too much, and then you'll have a disaster effect. So you're going to, if you want to do a project like this, you're going to have to accept the fact that it'll be a little bit on the clumpier side. But anyways, I am adding solder to all the branches, and I'm going to end up covering everything, but I'm going from one area to another. I'm not concentrating on one branch or one leaf for long. I'm going hiddly-piddly around until the whole thing gets done. So you want an area to cool down a bit before you go back to it. And you want to get every area covered, obviously. The reason why we want to cover all of it is that makes it all look like it's all one item. Like if you left the coils, I mean, you can do whatever you want to do, but if you want it all to look similar in structure when you're done, then you need to cover everything. Now you notice that that foil kind of let go a little bit at the top right hand corner there, and that's because that piece of foil was quite small, and when I heated it up, it did release a little, and I can either take that piece of foil off, put a new one on maybe, or just add more solder so that it holds it still. So this takes a while, going around the whole project and adding solder to everything. I basically want to cover up all my copper. Now, even if I'm going to patina it in a copper color, I want it all to look similar in texture. So to do that, I need to cover it with solder. Yes, it takes a lot of solder. So if you don't want to spend a lot of money on solder, then don't do this type of project, because this may take a whole spool of solder to do a project this size. And a spool of solder usually costs between $22 to $35, depending on the brand and how you buy it. So it's not an inexpensive project in that you will be using a lot of solder and a lot of wire, but it is fun when you're done. And I'm obviously soldering the inside and the outside because I will be able to see inside this a little bit. I'm still going to do it very lightly. When I get to a foiled area, I'm going to have to only solder a little bit at a time. But like right here where I am worried about the part that I kind of sewed on with the wire, I can heat up that area all at once because there is no foiling. So it's only where there's foil that you have to really worry about heating it up too much at one time. So I'm just going around and around and making sure that everything is soldered. Now I'm not done adding glass to this. It's just easier to have the areas already soldered before you add the next area. It's really up to you. You could wait until you're all done with your project and then add solder all around. This right here is where, those loops that I started at the beginning of this video, I am now putting flat, round, like 15 millimeter in diameter green globs to this. So these green globs I foiled. I used about a quarter of the width of the of my 7/32 inch black backed foil, and I am now putting them in place, holding them as steady as I can. And as you can see, I'm just adding a titch of solder to a couple different places and letting it cool down a little bit before I go back to it. After I've cooled it down a little, I'm now adding a little bit more solder to another area. Now you can add these after you've attached it to the inside of your, around your frame of your hoop, the wire hoop that you have, Or you can do like I'm doing right now and getting them all ready and then attach them after they're already soldered. I find it's easier to solder them when they're flat, and then you can bend them slightly into the curve and add the whole thing as one unit. It just seems to be easier, and you can keep them more accurately consistent as you're going. So I'm going from one to another, just adding a little bit of solder and then turning it a different direction and adding solder again to a different way. These glass globs, as you can see, kind of fit on the outside, so it really depends on the size. I could have used a little bit smaller glass globs and put them between the two pieces of wire. It really depends on what you want and what colors you have. I obviously wanted green. I thought these would look nice being this size and this color, so this is why I chose these particular ones. I'm holding them in place, and as you can see, I have kind of a gap between the glass and the end, and I just put a piece of wire between those two. And you can see this is done. It's outside. I'm getting ready to add patina to it. I actually patina now by putting the patina in a plastic bag, which works nice. I'm decorating this with some acrylic copper paint. I'm just adding a titch of copper highlight to the patina. Now, I don't do this to all my projects, but I wanted the black patina to have a little bit of a highlight to it. So I'm adding just like the highlights of the solder. I'm just rubbing my paintbrush with a little bit of paint to the highlights. So this kind of added just a little interest to the branches. So when the candle's not lit and you just have it sitting there in your room, it still is going to look fun instead of being flat black. Now, I know the patina looks really dry and kind of grayish right now, but just wait a minute. I'm going to add some linseed oil to it, and that will kind of seal the patina, and it will make the paint sing a little bit, and that makes it look really nice. So you need to finish the patina with something. There's all different things people use, and I just like to use linseed oil. It coats the patina nicely, gives it a nice finish, and then I rub off the extra with a paper towel. And so this is my project when it's finished and lit up. I think it looked very pretty. I was very happy with this, and I like the way that it glows all around. Thanks for watching. Have fun creating your own project. Bye.